My high school nightmare. I used to get bullied, and so did pretty much all of my friends. I've witnessed some of it, and I couldn't believe how cruel and degrading people could be. It wasn't a shock when Sally, my best friend, brought up a boy she had made friends with in a conversation. We were on holiday at the time, and I already knew this kid. He was quiet, pretty smart, awkward, and clearly sad. She explained how he got bullied for his voice and how his ex-girlfriend was spreading rumors that he was faking a condition and that he didn't really sound like that. She wanted to know if she could let him sit with us at lunch because he usually didn't have anyone to sit with. I obviously agreed to it, not really knowing that much about him. I had talked to him a couple of times, and he seemed pretty happy about having someone to talk to, but I couldn't see any personality when I talked to him. Everything he did just seemed odd, like it wasn't really him. I know that sounds strange, but that's how I felt. His name was Samael, an unusual name, but quite nice. He seemed like a kind person, but he still had that weird feeling about him. After a while of talking to him, Sally and I got to know him better. He liked dark jokes, much like me, and he was really into Doctor Who. None of us really knew much about it, but we still let him talk about his interests so that he would feel more comfortable around us. He talked a lot. I didn't even realize he had feelings for Sally until he asked me if she likes Harry Potter and what her favorite colors are. She soon realized this too, but she had just gotten over a boy, so she made it clear that she wasn't interested. He wouldn't leave her alone. Always next to her, somewhere nearby. It started to get to her, and she hated it. She felt as though she couldn't be alone, so I tried to do something about it. I wanted to help, so I turned his attention from her to me. I started hanging out with him more often, listening to his terrible, unfunny jokes, to his strange interest, to everything he said. I tried to make it seem like I wanted to be there, even though at this point I really didn't. I wanted to get away from him. He was beginning to tire me out emotionally, with him constantly being there, somewhere near me. He wouldn't leave me alone. He even walked home with me and my friend Gwen, despite the fact that he walks in the opposite way to get to his house. At one point, I was going through a particularly hard time, and being desperate for help and someone to talk to, I turned to him. I knew it was the wrong move, but desperation led me to make that move. He asked to video call me, so I agreed. I was crying. He tried to calm me down. Eventually he did, and just started making his horrible jokes and talking about things I like and stuff he actually shouldn't have known about, but I didn't think of it at the time because I wanted someone to make me laugh. Laughter got me through a lot of hard times. I began to think he wasn't so bad after all, and that we just didn't like him for what he did to Sally, but maybe he wasn't like that. I started talking to him through video almost every day after school, and I noticed him being around even more often. One day, he said he needed to tell me something, which turned out to be his confession. He confessed that he had a crush on me, but I had to go because my mom wanted to watch a movie. When I returned, I had about 10 videos and voice messages from him. All of them were him apologizing because he apparently thought I hadn't actually left to go watch a movie, but was instead avoiding him because of what he told me. I felt horrible. I didn't mean to upset him. He was crying. I explained that I really went to watch a movie, and that's why I was gone. Fortunately, he understood. After a while of hanging out with him, I began to get tired of him again, with him constantly being there and knowing that he liked me now. I looked back to the situation with Sally and began to spot the same things in our friendship. He got clingy and just downright annoying. I politely explained to him that I didn't want to sit with him at lunch anymore, but he still insisted that I sat with him. I declined and just told him to go away every time he approached our table. One particular incident made me lose all respect for him though. He would sometimes randomly walk with me and Gwen, as I mentioned before. But this time it was different. Outside was a thick mist, but even I could see in it, and according to my friends who have looked through my glasses, I am technically blind. Samael didn't wear glasses or contacts, because there is nothing wrong with his eyes. Well, we walked all the way to Gwen's house, and we said our goodbyes. I often stayed at her house after school, and we would watch videos together that she would get in her recommendations. About an hour into me being there, we hear a knock at the door. She goes to answer it, thinking it's her parents. Needless to say, it wasn't her parents, it was Samael. I heard his voice and dropped to the floor, hoping he hadn't seen me. After a long while of silence, I proceeded to army crawl over to the door to see if he was still there, and behold he was. "Hello?" His voice echoed in my mind at this point. I began to crawl back. "I'm lost. I can't find my house. Can you guys help me?" he asked. Liar. How could he possibly not know where his house is? And it's not like I knew where it was. I'd never been there. He persisted and continued to knock on Gwen's door. She was hiding in the living room. We came to the decision that we would hide in the conservatory until he goes away, and so we did. Some time passed before Gwen chose to climb onto a desk to see if he was still there. I jumped back when she yelped and stumbled off the desk, almost knocking me over. She turned to look at me and pointed in the direction she was looking. "He's still there. He was looking directly at me. He freaking waved at me," she whispered. "No way," I whispered back. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't happening. We weren't trapped by him. He wasn't outside. This was all just a joke or something. But Gwen's face looked so scared and in a way angry. I awkwardly got my stuff and told her I was going to head out to get him the hell away from her house. She reluctantly agreed, and I left with him. I offered to walk him down to the shop and let him go from there, but he refused to let me leave. He told me he couldn't see very well and that he almost got hit by a car earlier. This boy had boasted so many times about how good his eyesight was. There was no way he suddenly couldn't see. Despite his apparent sight problem, he flawlessly led me to his house. At this point, I was in an area completely unknown to me, and I began to worry. How would I get home? It was already dark, and there was no way I was going to wander an area I had never been in, especially in the dark. Who knows what kind of creeps could have been hiding there? I brought this up to him, and he assured me that his mom would drop me off. I didn't want that. I didn't want him to know where I lived. With how he was acting, I was fully convinced he would try to pull something. I suffer from symptoms of schizophrenia, and this didn't at all make it better for me. I felt unbelievably unsafe at that moment, and wished that I hadn't left Gwen's and explained it to my mom later. I was sure she would understand. Countless minutes dragged on as I sat and waited in his room, surrounded by his cats. They were the only thing keeping me from snapping and just trying to make my way back home on my own. Soon enough, his mom arrived and agreed to drop me off. Seeing how distressed I looked, she offered me some chocolates and assured me that I would be fine. She must have thought that she was the problem. It wasn't her. He was in the car. He would know where I live now. I wanted to cry. This brought back so many horrible memories with stalkers I'd had in the past. He was so much like all of them. His eyes gave me that horrible feeling of hopelessness, and I hated it. After they dropped me off at my house, I went to my mom and broke out in tears. I couldn't take it anymore. He went too far this time. My mom said that she was going to report him for that, because he wasn't going to cause me this much stress and get away with it. I agreed at the time, but soon after I asked my mom to just forget it. Maybe this would all go away. It didn't. The next day I told him that I wasn't allowed to talk to him anymore because my mom told me not to, but he still refused to leave me alone. I obviously got mad due to having enough of this crap and had a complete mental breakdown, saying that I was going to get Tim, my boyfriend, on him because I was done. Gwen and Felicity, my other friend, tried to take me to one of our most trusted teachers, but a few other teachers, despite seeing me crying hysterically, refused to let us through because she probably won't be able to help. So we found another teacher and explained the whole situation to her. She assured me that she would speak with him and attempt to get this sorted. Throughout the entirety of my geography class, I was having major anxiety, but I calmed down in a bit. When lunch came about, I saw Gwen standing next to the door holding Samuel's stuff. "What the heck is this about?" I questioned. "I don't know. He just dumped it on me and left. Now he's in the toilet," she told me. Then one of my male friends who knew about the situation approached us and offered to take his stuff while we leave. I thanked him a million times and we hurried away. We reached the hall and sat down at the table where Sally and Felicity were, and everything seemed fine until he showed up again. He seemed quite angry, so I assumed the teacher we spoke to had talked to him. I began to panic, thinking that this wouldn't end well, that we were all in danger. Then Riley, another close friend, walked over to him, attempting to save me from an episode. She told him that I don't feel alright and that he should probably go, but he completely ignored her. and asked me if I wanted food. I nervously shook my head. He started saying that he was going to pass out and that he needs to sit down. Riley calmly told him that he can go sit down somewhere else because this isn't the best time. He turned to her, fury in his eyes, and yelled, "Now!" I hid my face in my hands. I felt weak, like I was going to start hyperventilating. He sat down, and Riley, having had enough of this, grabbed my arm and said, "Come on, let's go," while dragging me away, the others following. He also left the hall, but luckily he didn't follow us. Then all of the build-up, stress and anger caused me to start hyperventilating and crying because I felt like I put not only myself but others in danger. I didn't know what to do anymore. Then Chad came and said that he'll talk to him for me and ask him to sit with him instead of us. Once again I thanked him with all my heart, and we went back into the hall. One of my old friends, Shayla, he is now transgender and his name is Jaden, came up to us and told her about the entire situation. She told us that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and that he had a book in which he wrote about plans for mass homicide and that he calls it Samailism. Then Chad returned and told me that Samael wants to talk to me after science and how I probably should. So, after science, I waited for him, and he said he hadn't realized he was causing a problem. Of course he did. How can he be so damn oblivious to his own actions? He then proceeded to tell me how bad this day was, and I ended up having to walk him to the office. I told Tim about it, and he said that he would meet me after school on Wednesday and sort it out if he doesn't stop. I was very thankful for this. I just wanted Samael out of my life. He still wouldn't leave me alone after all that. He even specifically moved next to me in English class. After everything that happened on Friday, he still persisted with his little game. That day was parents' evenings at school, so I went with my mom and left my phone at home. When I got back and looked at my phone, my heart dropped. 20 messages, 20 of them within half an hour, all from Samael. I started ranting about all of this to myself, and even went in the bathroom to practice what I was going to say to him the next day. I started crying again because all of this was just too much to bear. Then I decided to do something. I decided to call him out on all this stuff and inform him that a troubled childhood isn't an excuse to put someone in this situation. He actually tried to guilt trip me into forgiving him by telling me about his awful childhood, and I admit that I felt bad for him because no one should have to go through that kind of pain. But to show him that he isn't the only one who has dealt with things in the past, I told him about myself. Halfway through me explaining that I had a lot of trouble showing and experiencing emotions as a child, and that I had a lot of violent homicidal thoughts, he interrupted me, saying he also didn't have emotions and that he had tried to kill someone because he thought it was funny. This actually pissed me off, because not only was he interrupting me to add to his story and try to make me feel even worse, he was trying to one-up me on my suffering. If you ask me, that is completely disgusting. You don't compare struggles because you only have your own experiences to go off of. Don't try to make another person feel as though their problems don't matter and that they shouldn't ask for help with their problems because they're too small. That's just wrong. I calmly told him that I let him finish his story without interruptions and that it was only fair for him to let me finish mine. He quickly apologized, being caught out on his bullshit. I told him the rest of my story and let him realize that he really wasn't the only one who had gone through stuff in his childhood. He then began begging me for another chance at being my friend. I declined and decided to talk with Sally instead, ignoring the rest of his messages. Every day until that point, and even for a while after, was just me feeling like I was going to die. I actually contemplated suicide for a while because I couldn't deal with his constant presence. I was afraid to leave my house because I felt like he would be there. I know this is a bit strange, but I felt that way because of the schizophrenia. My episodes began getting more frequent and severe. There were periods of time where I could not concentrate in class and actually couldn't hear what the teacher was saying because of my auditory hallucinations. I generally felt like crap, and it got so bad that I felt like I didn't want to be here anymore. But after telling him to bugger off, I felt like a giant weight was removed off my chest and that I could breathe my own air again. Not for long though, because he kept trying to come back into my life, despite me refusing to be his friend ever again. I was still there for him, but only in absolute emergencies. By that I mean that only if he was on the verge of dying. I wish I could say that he left me alone since then, and that I never saw him after that, but I can't, because I still see him around at school, and unfortunately he's friends with my friend Brian, so I still have to hang out around him, which sucks. He annoys me purposely to get my attention by calling himself God and other things that suggest he thinks way too highly of himself. Anyhow, that's about it for my story. Samael, please shut up about your godly status for 1 second and realize that the reason people hate you is because you do this shit. Not only once, not twice, but always. So pause, think, and stop so that you don't melt any more brains. My ex-husband stalker. I divorced a narcissistic sociopath 17 years ago. He still stalks me. He drives by my house several times every day. He goes through my trash after he goes to the curve. He follows anyone that comes over all the way to their home. He has forced people over to find out why they were at my house. Once I had a contractor come over to put a bed on a fence. He followed him home and harassed him and his wife. He won't stop, ever. He knows my schedule, when I go to work and come home, when I walk my dogs. I've reported him many times. He denied it. My kids have told him to stop or else. He still does. Technology has been my only hope. I have cameras on and in my house. I have a dash cam in my car, and when I walk my dogs I have a GoPro running. So after sending my kids video proof 100 times instead of stopping, he just moved 2 blocks away. No one can say anything because he lives in my neighborhood. My life revolves around avoiding him at all cost. My lights are off before it gets dark, so he won't think I'm home. I take my 2 German Shepherd dogs with me when I go anywhere but work. I don't have people come over because they don't need to watch out for him. What can I do? When I retire, I plan on moving to another state just to have peace. I have blocked him from every social media site. He kept sending friend requests just to see what I post. If I disappeared, everyone will know who to go to. I don't know why he does this. What does he get out of any of this? If I go to a gas station or a restaurant, I will see him sitting in their parking lot just to watch me. He doesn't work, so this is all he does.